This is right next to the lake where I had my spiritual awakening moment that changed my life. It's always really special to be back here. I kind of want to go swimming, even though it's cold out. The water just feels delicious on my skin. This is actually a really special, close to my heart story, my spiritual awakening. And of course, after it happened, I wanted to tell the people I loved right away, like my close family and friends. I could tell that not everyone got it or understood where I was coming from, which is totally understandable. It actually made me feel more alone to share it with certain people. And there's lessons in that, not pushing any of your stuff on deaf ears or people that aren't wanting to learn about it in that way. I did stay quiet about it for a long time, and then if someone was receptive, then I would share the story with them. Now more time has gone by. I don't know, it's probably been about 7 years, and there hasn't been a single day since that happened where it hasn't stayed with me. I mean, you can't, when you wake up and you see something like that, you can't unsee, you can't ever go back to the same way of living that you were before. And I'm sure that other people that have had spiritual awakening experiences can also relate to this. Where does this story begin? It's like the journey of life that we're all on. It's hard to sum up things in little blips or sound bites or stories, but I'm just going to try to be real as possible and include the parts that matter. First, I'll give a little bit of my background. So I grew up in Washington State. When I was a little girl, around 4 or 5, that's when I lost all the hair on my body. I got exposed to chemicals along with a neighbor boy. Maybe I'll tell that whole story in another video. Yeah, it's pretty interesting and weird, I know. Still don't have any hair on my body. It's alopecia universalis. That was its own struggle, of course, as you guys can imagine. And I'm sure a lot of people that look different or just feel different or had experiences like that as children. Well, you know what? I think anyone, period, can relate to difficult feelings growing up as a child or young adult around your self-esteem or learning who you are. And after I got sick, my mom was pretty scared and she just wanted me to get better. So we moved up north in the woods in my grandma's log cabin and stayed with her. And that I grew up in a really small town. That's where I spent my life, had my own struggles and identity. My mom started practicing Nichiren Daishonin Buddhism. And so my mom was a practicing Buddhist growing up, and we would always chant, and we would have Sunday meetings, like people go to church every Sunday, and gatherings of very sweet, nice people, and they would all chant together. A lot of really good lessons there, but the language they use and everything, it's not totally relatable. And I think that even people in other religious backgrounds can relate, where you're getting and you're around all of this wisdom, but it's encoded and worded in ways that is hard to understand for children or young adults, or they don't make it practical, tangible, and relatable. A lot of my family was just atheists, and my dad, my Asian side of my ancestors, my family, I didn't grow up with. I didn't know. I haven't been in contact with my dad since I was 4 or 5. I'll link a story about that below in the info description. So you can see that I'm coming from like somewhat Buddhist background, wasn't ever raised with the idea of God, really. My grandfather, the only male figure in my life, was very, very atheist. Actually had books on his shelf talking about the dangers of believing in God and the harm that religion has on society and blah, blah, blah. I remember my family even getting really worked up about us having to do the Pledge of Allegiance at school or talk about God. They would make fun of Christians or talk about how backwards or unloving or hypocritical they could be, which is the case with some people that are religious or spiritual from any background. It's people are not perfect. People are not God. And if you put any person on that pedestal or expect them to be like that, you're going to get let down, just period. So there's my background that I'm coming from. Went to college. Oh, a fish just jumped. A salmon. Went to college, had adventures, fell into a lot of addictions, a lot of horrible addictions. I think all of us can relate to that, of the world sucking us in different ways, where we have childhood trauma or just trauma in general, and we're trying to get our needs met and to feel loved on a deep level. And we seek things of the world, whether that be through drugs or alcohol or sex or money, approval from other people. It's never going to fill that void. And all of us are human. I'm not perfect still to this day. Even after I had this experience and I could see all of it, I still have to lean on God and ask for guidance with humility and patience and forgiveness, and realize that I'm not perfect, and I do stumble and I mess up, and it's great because I'm just like a child here. I'm a child of God, and I know that I'm cared for and I'm loved. At the time that this happened, to set it up, I was going through like the deepest, most tumultuous relationship of my entire life that I had ever had. As always, we project our stuff into other people. The stuff that they're bringing up, relationships are where a lot of learning and emotions come up. I was in love with him more than I had ever loved anyone, and I was creating these situations where he was abandoning me emotionally, physically, and it felt like the worst pain I had ever been through. And as you guys know, when you love someone so much, even when we're having these really hard emotions coming up, it can be even harder to leave them. It was the abandonment from him, addictions, and like all of these other things. It's a perfect storm. And at the time I lived here in the middle of nowhere, I just remember sobbing and sobbing. We just split and he left. I was at my little cabin in the woods. No neighbors were in any of the houses around me. I think the next year I had people move in, but at the time there was no one around me. I did not have a smartphone, cell phone. There's no cell phone reception anyway. There was no internet, no distractions. It's the rainforest. It was pouring rain like all the time, all night. This was the dead of winter. Super dark, huge, ancient rainforest all around me with 300-foot tall trees towering above. Just the lake, just stillness. And there was literally just no escape from my pain. I remember just crying and my soul just like feeling like it was breaking apart. And I went to bed and I had a nightmare that he left me. And then when I woke up, you guys know the feeling after you wake up out of a really bad nightmare. It was like that feeling, like, and then I woke up and it was true. It was just my reality, and I just was breaking and sobbing, and I walked up out of my bed to the living room, and I was just crying and crying alone, and I just felt like no one was there. There was no escape. No one could hear me. No one could feel my pain, and it just magnified it, and there was no distractions. I couldn't, call a friend and vent to them and have them sympathize with the whole story I had created in my head. It was just, I had to be alone with it. And then I had this supernatural experience where the light broke. I saw everything all at once. I can try to describe this experience that I had. It was instantaneous, all of this that came through. It was so expansive that it can be hard to put in words, but I saw that everything in the universe, everything in the world was made out of love. It was such an intense feeling of overwhelming love that I can't even describe. And I saw that everything happened for a reason. Everything in my life, everyone else's life, it was all this super intelligent design that we couldn't understand. And that this moment of having the light break through and me coming to this realization was perfectly orchestrated and perfect in that moment, that I had to be taken out of where I was living, of living around friends, living in a city, and there was no escape, no neighbors, there was no friends, no internet or cell phone reception. Even walking out and sitting in the sunshine or by the lake, it was just torrential downpour constantly, drowning in this moment of intense emotion. And even though it went from being the most intense, worst pain I had ever felt in my life, emotionally, physically, like I just wanted to die, and it transformed into a moment of such awe and wonder and gratitude for all of it. The air became electric, and I had these visions of seeing through the dimensions. I didn't know what was going on. I didn't know what a psychic vision was. I didn't know what even just visions in general. I didn't know that they were real. I didn't know that people could have them. I saw things in my field around me, and I remember just being like, whoa, and thinking that they were just really cool. And then I must have been like 1.5 to 2 years later, I was reflecting back on the story and reading through my journal, and I was like, whoa, the stuff that I saw ended up coming true, and I had no idea at the time. I was just shocked. And a big thing that came through when I felt God, I was just like, right away, like when I felt that everything was made out of love, and it expanded like that. I remember right away just thinking, just saying, I think I even said out loud, like, God is real. Wow. The power of it was so huge and shook my soul. I could just see that nothing was an accident. Like I said before, it was all around us, showing us things, that nothing was an accident. Even I don't care what it is, like the more awake you are or more connected you are to God, the more that you see that nothing is an accident. And I can understand now why spiritual people can look crazy to people that haven't had any experience like this, or that are living in their mind or in logic or the world, and they're looking for evidence of things that they can measure or put something on. But to get there, there's only one way, and that's through the heart. That's through seeing with your spiritual eyes and through your emotions and heart. And that's the main thing I learned, is that everything's happening it's like this school that we're in here, this beautiful spiritual school, and that everything is happening to evoke a certain emotional response for us. It's happening for us to teach us about love and teach us how to love ourselves and love one another. I saw that only hurt people were hurting other people, and I had this overwhelming depth of compassion for everybody in that moment, that I just was non-stop crying about everything that we were doing to each other and how we were all hurting each other. But it was out of naivety. It was almost innocent in a way. No matter what it was, that's what it was about. And I'm still human. I lean on God, and I remember that moment. I remember other supernatural moments that I've had, or just with the Spirit of God filling me and touching me. And I know that that's true, and I'm still human though. I still get triggered by people and situations. I can still be weak. I can still escape or have addictions, but I know that as a baseline. So now when I get triggered by somebody or something, I always ask myself, what is this trying to teach me, or how can I feel this emotion fully? Like it's making me, for example, like it could be making me afraid or making me feel guilty. And then I lean into the emotion with different healing techniques I've picked up that I'll share in some of my other videos. I lean into that emotion and I look at, what is this telling me about myself? What is trying to be felt? What is wanting my attention? How can I give this over to God? How can I feel the kingdom of God within myself more freely and openly, and look through God's eyes of love at this situation, or just ask for healing? We have a lot of unseen support, and you can always pray, you can always ask angels for help, and it's amazing how many miracles I've seen in other people's lives, in my life, just from that. And even now, it's like I'll go through really tough times or something, and then I'm like, oh yeah, I can I can just pray. I don't have to. In fact, it works against us when we're just constantly trying to figure out stuff with our mind, and we're like, how can I get out of this? How can I fix this? How can I do this? And it's like, okay, how about just letting go? How about asking for help from something larger than you that is way more intelligent? Yeah. And there's more. That's part of my story. But it is really trippy that was like I know I'm talking a lot about everything that I learned in that instant. It was so real. I can't even describe to you. It was more real than anything here. The spiritual realm, everything manifests in the spiritual realm first. And that realm is so much larger and so much more real than things here. And that's really trippy to think about. But it was like 1 second of that has stayed with me for up to this point, 7 years. I'm sure, I mean, of course it's going to stay with me till the day that I pass on. Whenever that is, I don't know. That's how real it was. It's something that's unshakable. I can't unsee it. I can't unknow those things. I have a new lens of seeing the world, of relating to myself and to relating to other people and how I interact with life. And it's beautiful. I would never go back. One reason why I'm making this video is that a while back at a retreat, they were doing an exercise like, if you had every resource in the world and all the time in the world and you knew that you were going to die, what would you want to do? My heart and my soul just really wanted to go and tell the people that I loved the most, or people in general, about how much they were loved, about how real God was, and how they were never, never alone. And part of that comes from how much pain and suffering I've experienced in my life, and how many times I've felt completely alone, or completely unloved, or completely unworthy, and that we are all worthy. We are all so loved. I didn't want to go on a vacation somewhere. Even if I had all the time, resources, money in the world, it would actually just feel completely meaningless to me, even if I knew I was going to die in a week. I could be seeing any monument in the world, any place, have any luxury. Nothing is as meaningful, nothing is as filling as that spirit of God, that connection to the universal source, to the universe, to love, and letting other people know how loved they were. That just feels so much more fulfilling, so much more important. It really just makes everything else just seem meaningless when I think about just the fact that I could just die. Like, oh, what if I just leave? So that makes me think, why don't I just tell people about it now and stop being so shy? The reaction I had afterward honestly did scare me from telling the story, because it's like people looking at me like, are you okay? And I'm like, you don't understand. We're in the matrix. No. The more you love yourself, the more you can love others and see them through the lens of love. And naturally what people want to do when they clear a lot of that stuff out is they want to serve others. They want other people to know how loved they are, and that becomes the most important thing. Oh, my leg's asleep. Oh. Hope you guys enjoyed. Thank you for joining me.